The sound of rain tapping against the vast windows of the penthouse suite was the only thing that cut through the midnight silence. High above the city, in an apartment that smelled faintly of expensive leather and fresh polish, Daniel Whitaker, CEO of Whitaker Dynamics, sat alone in his study, staring at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen like it was taunting him. A $200 million problem. A number so big it didn't even feel real, except it was. Overnight, an unexpected breach in one of their flagship software systems had opened a hole big enough to drain $200 million in pending deals and push the company to the edge of collapse. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhausted, suit jacket draped over the back of his chair, tie loosened just enough to let him breathe, but not enough to ease the tightness in his chest. He could hear the faint hum of the city below, a billion lights blinking against the rain, mocking him for thinking he could control all this. Down the hall, the cleaning crew was finishing up for the night. He'd insisted his penthouse stay spotless, not because he cared about shiny floors, but because tidiness made him feel like he had control over something. Maria was the last one left. She always stayed late. She was quiet, reliable, invisible in that way people in uniform sometimes are to men like Daniel. He'd never really looked at her. Not really. She'd been with the service for 6 years, moving from apartment to apartment. Always polite. Always blending in. Tonight, though, something felt different. He could hear her faint footsteps, the soft squeak of rubber soles on marble. They were supposed to be gone an hour ago. He almost called out to remind her he was still working, that he didn't want to be disturbed, but stopped himself. The cursor blinked again. He swore under his breath and slammed the laptop shut. Maybe he needed a drink. Or maybe he needed to stand by the window and pretend he had an answer. He stepped out of his study, walking down the hallway lined with framed awards and a single massive oil painting of his father, the man who'd built Whitaker Dynamics from a dusty corner office into a titan of cybersecurity. Daniel's father's eyes seemed to follow him as he passed, their silent judgment heavier tonight than ever. When he reached the kitchen, he froze. Maria was there, but not cleaning. She was standing at the marble island, her back to him, the faint glow of a second laptop casting a halo around her. His backup laptop. The one he'd left open on the counter by accident, the files he'd been reviewing still up on the screen. She didn't hear him come in. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, precise, fast, like she was reading a language only she understood. For a second, Daniel's throat tightened with anger. What the hell does she think she's doing? He was about to bark her name, but something made him stop. He stepped closer, silent. He could see the screen now. Lines of code, columns of data, his disaster in all its raw, ugly numbers, but something was changing. New lines. Corrections. Replacements. She wasn't just looking. She was fixing it. Maria leaned in, her brow furrowed, mumbling softly to herself in Spanish, the same language he'd heard her whisper when she scrubbed floors and hummed to fill the silence. But now the words were sharper, like commands to the machine. Daniel's mind raced. Was she stealing data? Selling secrets? But then he saw the log files she'd just patched. The security hole, it was closed. He'd spent 12 hours on calls with the best team in the city and none of them had even seen that flaw. But she, the maid, had found it in seconds. Before he could stop himself, he spoke. Maria. She jumped so hard she nearly knocked over the laptop. She spun around, her eyes wide, a mix of fear and embarrassment that turned her face pale under the harsh kitchen lights. Senor Whitaker. I'm sorry, She stammered, stepping back as if she'd touched something she shouldn't have. Daniel held up a hand. What were you doing? His voice was softer than he meant it to be. Maria's eyes darted to the screen, then to him. She swallowed hard. I saw the files. They were open. I know I shouldn't, but I used to do this work. Back home. Before. Daniel felt something shift under his feet, like the marble floor might crack. Back home? You're a programmer. Maria glanced down, twisting the rag in her hands until it looked like it might tear. Systems engineer. In Bogota. Before I came here. The rain beat harder against the windows. Daniel looked at the screen, at the patched code, the problem that had stolen his sleep now reduced to a blinking line of text, harmless as a house cat. He exhaled. For the first time in 2 days, he felt something like hope scratching at the walls of his panic. But behind it was a bigger question, swelling up like a storm. Who was this woman really, and what else could she do? And just like that, Daniel Whitaker realized his entire company, maybe his entire life, had just changed, because his maid refused to stay invisible. Daniel Whitaker hadn't felt small in a very long time. But as he stood there, watching Maria close the laptop with trembling hands, he felt like a man who just stumbled onto a door he didn't even know existed, and behind it was something bigger than him. Bigger than his company. Maybe even bigger than the entire empire his father had built brick by brick, lawsuit by lawsuit. He gestured stiffly for her to sit at the island, but Maria hesitated, glancing at the spotless floor as if she expected to be scolded, or worse, fired on the spot, and marched out under the eyes of the building's security team. Please. Sit. Daniel's voice was low but firm, softer than the edge he usually carried into every boardroom. She obeyed, perching on the edge of the tall stool like she might slip off any second. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was punctuated by the soft tick of the rain against the glass. Then Daniel cleared his throat, ran a palm over his jaw. How long have you been working for me?" he asked. Maria looked up, surprised. "For years, Senor Whitaker." "For years," he echoed, almost to himself. "And all this time, you've just cleaned." She shifted uncomfortably. "It was work. Good work. It paid the bills. And before that, you said Bogota. Systems engineer." Maria nodded. There was something almost apologetic in her eyes, like it embarrassed her to admit it. "I had my degree. Worked for a telecom company. But, after my husband died, I needed to support my son. It was safer to come here. Even if it meant cleaning houses instead of fixing networks." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, a mix of shame and curiosity. He'd sat in rooms with men who called themselves geniuses. He'd flown them in from Silicon Valley, London, Singapore, paid them more for a single meeting than Maria probably made in a year scrubbing marble floors. And not one of them had found what she just fixed in seconds. He reached for the laptop, opening it again, turning it so the glow spilled between them like a bridge. "Show me exactly what you did." Maria hesitated, then slid the laptop closer, her fingers brushing the keys with the ease of muscle memory. She pulled up the log files, lines of code that looked like gibberish to anyone without the patience, or the hunger, to decode them. "This gap here," she pointed, tapping the screen gently. "It's old code. Looks secure, but it leaves a small opening if you know where to look. Hackers, they look for old habits. Lazy patches. I rewrote it so the system checks twice. Self-corrects. Like a lock that locks itself again if someone tries to pick it." Daniel watched, half amazed, half insulted by his own ignorance. "And you just saw this?" "Just, what, cleaning my kitchen." Maria gave a small shrug. "I saw the folder. You forgot to log out. I recognized the structure, same architecture I worked with before. It was easy. Easy." He almost laughed. "Easy," she says. The same word his CTO had spat out 2 hours ago when he told Daniel it would take weeks and millions to patch the breach. He sank onto the stool opposite her, suddenly aware of how absurd this moment was, him, in a $3,000 shirt, and her in a faded gray uniform that still smelled faintly of bleach and lavender floor cleaner, and yet she was the only one in the entire building with an answer. "Maria," he said carefully, do you realize what you've just done?" She met his eyes for the first time since he'd walked in. There was no smugness there. No pride. Just a quiet steadiness. "I know I shouldn't have touched it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "No," Daniel cut in, shaking his head. "No, I'm not angry. I'm just. Do you know you may have saved this company?" Maria lowered her eyes, twisting her hands in her lap. "I didn't think about that. I just saw something broken. I wanted to fix it." Daniel felt a laugh bubbling up, absurd and sharp at the edges. "She just saw something broken. That's it? That's all this was?" He looked at her, really looked this time. Not the uniform. Not the role. The person. The woman who once wrote code in Bogota, who crossed a border for her son, who cleaned other people's messes because that was what the world told her she was worth. "Maria," he said, voice steady now, the way it was when he made decisions that changed people's lives, or ruined them. "How would you feel about coming to the office tomorrow?" She blinked. "To clean?" He smiled, a thin, tired smile that felt like the first real one in months. "No. Not to clean. To fix things." Maria stared at him like he'd just offered her the moon. "Senor Whitaker. I don't have papers. I don't have the right degrees here. I don't even have my resume." He waved it off. "You have the proof right here." He tapped the laptop. "You saved me $200 million tonight, Maria. If anyone asks for your resume after that, they're fired." She gave a soft, incredulous laugh, her hands still worrying at the rag. I don't know. I have to think about my son. It's complicated." Daniel nodded, leaning forward. "I know. So let's make it simple. Come in tomorrow. We'll talk to legal. HR. We'll figure out the rest. And Maria, if you can do in my office what you did in my kitchen tonight, then this company doesn't just need you. It depends on you." Outside, the rain began to fade, the lights of the city blinking like promises against the wet streets. In that small, warm kitchen, something changed. Something that would ripple out to every corner office, every smug executive who thought they knew what talent looked like, what genius looked like. And Maria, quiet, steady, invisible Maria, was about to become the storm they never saw coming. The next morning, Daniel barely slept. He didn't even bother to change out of his rumpled shirt when the first blush of dawn cracked across the city skyline. He'd sent a text to his assistant at 4 a.m., "Clear my morning. Bring legal. Bring HR, bring risk management. And get the CTO in my office at 7 sharp." By 6:45, the top floor of Whitaker Dynamics was buzzing like a shaken beehive. No one knew why they'd been dragged in so early, but they could sense the urgency in the CEO's clipped voice. Rumors sparked like static in the hallways. Had the breach gotten worse? Was the company about to tank overnight? Nobody noticed the small figure in a plain gray coat, clutching her handbag like a shield, as she stepped out of the elevator behind Daniel. Maria had never seen an office like this. Glass walls. Sleek, cold furniture. Everyone moving with that hurried, caffeinated purpose that said they belonged here, or at least pretended to. She felt small under the stairs. Some people nodded politely, others barely looked twice, dismissing her as some housekeeper who must have gotten lost. Daniel swept past reception, pushing open the heavy glass door to the main boardroom. "In here," he told her gently. "Sit wherever you like." She sat in a chair near the far end of the massive polished table, trying to disappear into its shine. She could see her reflection in the glossy surface, hair pinned back, hands folded tight in her lap, her knuckles pale. One by one, the company's top brass filed in. Jason Milner, the CTO, walked in last, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, eyes bloodshot from the all-nighter he'd pulled with his own team trying to patch the breach. He barely glanced at Maria before sinking into his chair near Daniel. Jason launched right in. "Look, Daniel, if this is about the breach, I'm telling you we need at least 2 weeks. Maybe 3. We're still mapping the exposure. It's a mess. We can spin it for the board but..." "It's fixed," Daniel interrupted, his voice calm but sharp enough to slice through Jason's excuses. The room stilled. Jason frowned. "What do you mean it's fixed?" "Who?" He turned to his team seated along the wall. "Did someone push a hot patch overnight? Why wasn't I looped in?" Daniel gestured across the table. All eyes turned to Maria. She flinched as the stares landed on her, a dozen suits blinking at her like they'd just noticed an extra chair had come to life. "She fixed it," Daniel said simply. Silence. Then, soft chuckles around the table, the polite, condescending kind people use when they think their boss is making a joke that isn't funny but must be humored. Jason let out a tired laugh. "Daniel, what are you talking about? Who is this?" Daniel's tone didn't change. "This is Maria Alvarez. She's been with my household staff for 4 years. Last night, she closed the breach your team missed." A flush crept up Jason's neck. "With respect, Daniel, that's impossible. My guys have been crawling over that code for..." "And they missed it," Daniel cut in. He turned to Maria. "Show him." Maria opened the small laptop Daniel had insisted she bring. Her hands trembled at first, but once she started talking, they steadied. She explained the flaw, the overlooked legacy code, the lazy patch from years ago that hackers found before they did. She spoke simply, clearly, translating the maze of characters into language even the lawyers could follow. Jason leaned in, eyes darting between her screen and the pages of printed code spread before him. With every word she spoke, the flush on his neck deepened. When she finished, the room was silent. Maria closed the laptop and folded her hands again, waiting like she'd just recited a recipe instead of saving $200 million in shareholder value. Jason exhaled, pushing his glasses up his nose. "She's right," he said, his voice oddly hollow. "This would have taken us days to spot. Maybe weeks. And she did it overnight." The legal head cleared her throat. "Daniel, if this breach hadn't been closed, the lawsuits," she didn't finish the sentence. "She didn't have to." Daniel leaned back in his chair, fixing his eyes on every executive at that table. "Maria has done more for this company in 12 hours than half of you have done in a year. So here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, she's being brought on as a senior security consultant, with full salary, benefits, and stock options. I want her paperwork cleared by noon. If immigration is an issue, you'll solve it. If degrees are an issue, you'll sponsor the equivalency. Am I clear?" A few jaws dropped. Jason opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried. "Daniel, you can't just..." "Can't what?" Daniel's voice was a blade now. "Can't promote the person who just saved the company? Or can't admit that the smartest one in the room was the one scrubbing your floors?" A hush fell over the table. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, others stared at Maria like they were seeing her for the first time. Maria's eyes flicked between them, her pulse roaring in her ears. She felt like she might faint, the room too bright, too big, too cold. "Senor Whitaker," she said quietly, "I don't know if I can do this job. I have my son. My schedule." Daniel's voice softened. "We'll work around your life, Maria. Bring your son to the office if you need to. Take your meetings from home if you want. But you have a place here now, not because I'm giving you charity, but because you earned it." She looked down, blinking fast, trying to stop the tears she didn't want these suited strangers to see. And just like that, the old world, the world where Maria Alvarez was invisible, cracked and fell away like a shell. In its place was something terrifying and huge, but it was hers. Outside, the city woke up, another day, another billion-dollar deal somewhere. But inside that boardroom, word would spread like wildfire, the CEO's maid had saved them all. And what Daniel Whitaker did next didn't just shock the company, it rewrote its future, one quiet, extraordinary woman at a time.